I woke up at 2:57 a.m. with a cold sweat soaking through my bedsheets, and the only light in my dark room came from my phone, glowing, vibrating, screen alive with a push notification from an app one didn't recognize and had no memory of downloading. Welcome, player. Your first challenge awaits. The name at the top read Exist, written in all caps, minimalist white on a black icon, like a prototype that hadn't even hit the App Store yet. Still half asleep and with my heart pounding for no reason I could name, I reached for my phone, convinced I was dreaming. But as soon as my thumb touched the screen, the phone buzzed again, not once, not twice, but in a long, almost, warning-like stutter, like it was trying to speak through vibration. The message changed right before my eyes. Challenge 1, take a selfie at exactly 3 a.m. timer, 2:14. 2:13. 2:12, it was counting down, and the timer wouldn't close, wouldn't swipe away, wouldn't force quit no matter how many times I tried. I thought maybe I'd been hacked. Or worse, maybe I'd finally gone insane. But when the clock struck 3 a.m. on the dot, I gave in, flipped the camera around, and snapped the selfie. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I was just humoring a glitch. But then I checked my banking app, and somehow, $500 had just been deposited into my checking account. The second I saw the money, my stomach turned in that deep, primal way that tells you something is wrong on a level that goes beyond logic. I stared at the screen in silence for a long time, the late-night quiet pressing in all around me like a damp cloth over my mouth. Then, another buzz. Another message. Challenge complete. Well done, player. The app made a strange sound I can only describe as a mechanical chuckle, glitched, warped, like a broken laugh trapped in binary. I tried deleting the app, but there was no uninstall option. I tried resetting my phone, but the power button didn't respond. And when the screen finally went black on its own, the last thing I saw was a new notification sliding into view like a blade across my vision. Challenge 2, knock on your neighbor's door. Don't speak. Timer, 03:00. I stared at that countdown as it began ticking again. My heart hammered. The neighbor's door was just 12 feet from mine, across the hallway. A perfectly average man, as far as I knew, quiet, polite, always nodded when we passed each other. But now, in the silence of my apartment building's dead-hour dark, the thought of knocking on anyone's door, without explanation or speech, felt invasive. It felt dangerous. And yet, I felt my legs moving before I gave them permission. I walked through the quiet hallway in my boxers, barefoot, phone in hand, timer ticking down in red digital numbers that glowed like they were burning into my retinas. I knocked once, sharp and loud, and immediately regretted it. The hallway stretched behind me like it had grown longer, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. I turned to leave, but the door creaked open before I could move, and I swear to God, what stood there wasn't my neighbor. Not entirely. It looked like him, same bald head, same sagging gray tank top, same tired face. But there was something off about his eyes. They didn't move right. Like a video buffering at the wrong speed, they jittered in micro-glitches and stared through me, not at me. I didn't say a word. I couldn't, the app had warned me not to speak. He leaned in slightly, skin pale as ash, breath shallow, eyes wide. Then, very slowly, his mouth stretched into an unnatural, almost painful grin. And he whispered in a voice that wasn't his, "Player 2 accepted." The door slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the hallway and froze the marrow in my bones. I looked down at my phone, and the screen flickered with static before displaying a single new word, good. The next morning, I woke up on the floor with my phone pressed flat against my chest, as if I had fallen asleep trying to shield myself from something. My front door was still locked, deadbolt engaged, but I don't remember walking back to my apartment. I don't even remember entering it. The last clear thing in my head was that awful whisper from the man, "Player 2 accepted," and that grotesque, almost predatory grin stretching over a face I once recognized. When I opened the app again, just to confirm I hadn't imagined everything, it had changed. The interface was slicker, smoother, like it had absorbed my data and upgraded itself overnight. A new icon blinked at the bottom of the screen, penalties enabled. Below that, a countdown had already begun, ticking away from 2 hours 43 minutes and 11 seconds. The challenge was simple but somehow worse than the last: don't answer your phone. No matter who calls. That might sound easy, until my mom's number lit up my screen at 9:02 a.m., buzzing and vibrating like it was trying to crawl off the table. The timer had frozen at 2 hours 41 minutes and 9 seconds the second her name appeared. I stared at it, my thumb hovering, gut instinct screaming to answer, but I didn't. I watched the call ring out, waited, then checked the app again. Challenge passed. But the relief didn't last. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again, this time, a voicemail notification. I pressed play, and my blood ran cold before the first word was finished. It wasn't my mother's voice. It was the sound of someone crying, or laughing. No. Both. The voice crackled with distortion, wet and hollow, and right before it cut off, I swear I heard a whisper, "You should have answered." I couldn't think straight. My head buzzed with static. I paced the room like an animal trapped in a cage, checking and rechecking the app, hoping for a clue, a glitch, some kind of logic to latch onto, but nothing made sense. There were no settings, no contact page, no uninstall button, no permissions list. Just challenges. Timers. And now, a streak counter, as if this was some cursed fitness app gamifying my sanity. That's when the hallucinations started, or maybe they weren't hallucinations at all, and that's what terrified me more. I opened my fridge and saw a sticky note on the milk jug that I didn't write. It said, "Don't drink this yet. You're not ready." My TV turned itself on and played a video of me sleeping, same room, same nightshirt, same blanket, but the timestamp read tomorrow. The lights in the hallway flickered when I stepped too close to the door. And every mirror in my apartment had developed a delay, like I was watching myself a half second behind real time. It was subtle at first, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. My reflection blinked before I did. My reflection smiled before I even thought to. At 11:11 a.m., my phone pinged again. New challenge: delete the last 3 people from your contact list. Don't look at who they are. I hesitated. It sounded so easy. Just 3 taps. But a terrible dread crawled up my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever this app was, it knew me. It wasn't guessing. It was selecting. I did it. My fingers moved on their own. Deleted 1, then 2, then 3, and as soon as the 3rd contact disappeared, my apartment door shook violently as if something massive had slammed against it from the outside. My phone screamed with another vibration, the screen flashing red like a warning alarm, penalty avoided. For now. I checked the contact list in my panic and realized I couldn't remember who had just been erased. Not just their names, everything. I couldn't picture their faces. I couldn't recall how I knew them. It was like the app had ripped them out of my mind, clean and absolute, like they'd never existed. My call logs were empty. My texts had blank spaces where conversations used to be. And the scariest part? My social media didn't show them either. They were gone. Not unfriended, deleted. From every corner of my digital life. Erased like corrupted data. As I sat on the floor, trembling and trying to remember anything, a voice rang out, not from the phone, but from my living room speaker, which hadn't worked in months. It said, in a distorted version of my own voice, "We don't need distractions anymore. Just focus on the game." I've always been careful about what I post online, overly careful, in fact. I've never been the kind of person who spills everything on social media or chases clout with hot takes, because I've always believed that the internet remembers more than it should, and that sometimes, attention isn't just dangerous, it's irreversible. But when I woke up to the sound of my phone screaming beside me, not buzzing, not ringing, but actually playing what sounded like multiple overlapping voices whispering in static, I knew the next challenge had arrived. I unlocked the screen and found a new notification sitting calmly, as if it hadn't just ripped me out of a dream where I was drowning in binary code and couldn't scream. Challenge 4, post this sentence on all your social platforms and leave it up for 24 hours, we're all just NPCs waiting for player 1. I laughed, at first, the kind of hollow, twitchy laugh that happens when your nervous system glitches from pure fear, because it was so absurd, so meme-like, so obviously a joke. But then I noticed the second part of the message: if you delete it early, the countdown stops. And it doesn't start again. There was a new feature on the app now, a digital bomb icon with a number, 00:24:00:00, ticking down every second. I thought about deleting the app. I thought about turning off my phone. But when I opened the camera by accident, the front-facing view showed something behind me, something tall, thin, and entirely out of place in my room. I spun around in real life, heart about to claw out of my throat, and nothing was there. Nothing but the app still glowing in my hand, waiting for me to comply. I did it. I posted it everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even the dead Facebook account I hadn't touched in years. Almost immediately, people started commenting, liking, sharing, even DMing me with things like, "You okay?" and "What's this about?" and the eeriest one of all, I remember that line. "Where did you hear it?" I had no idea what that meant, and I didn't want to ask. The app's timer kept counting down like a silent threat hanging over every second of my day, and I tried my best to act normal, go about my life, and pretend I hadn't just handed over a piece of my sanity to whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into, but things around me were changing again, in subtle, skin-crawling ways. I'd look out the window and see people standing still for minutes at a time, faces locked in a strange frozen expression, only to resume walking like nothing had happened the moment I blinked. I got texts from numbers I didn't recognize, all repeating the same emoji, I. The TV turned on again by itself, this time showing a live stream. It was my room. My exact room. But I wasn't in it, not at first. The camera angle was slightly higher than human eye level, and slowly, as I stared in mounting horror, I walked into frame. Except it wasn't me. It was a version of me that looked off, skin too smooth, movements too mechanical, eyes staring directly into the lens without blinking. It walked up to the camera, leaned in close, and whispered something I could only make out by replaying the footage back over and over again, frame by frame. It said, "You're not the only one playing." When I finally made it through the full 24 hours without deleting the post, the app rewarded me with another deposit, this time, $1,000. But that wasn't the real reward. That night, my ex-girlfriend messaged me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in over a year, and the breakup had been cold, distant, mutually detached. But there she was, suddenly texting me like nothing had happened. "Hey, weird question, but did you ever hear about something called Exist?" My blood turned to ice in my veins. I asked her why, and she said someone had commented the word under an old photo of us that she had never posted. She said it scared her because she was sure she deleted that photo. And she swore, absolutely swore, that she hadn't thought about me in months until last night when she had a dream where I handed her a phone and said, "It's your turn." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to tell her that I hadn't dreamt about her, because I hadn't been sleeping. Not since the game began. The moment I tried to reply, the lights in my room flickered again, and my screen cracked without warning, not from a fall or pressure, but as if it had been struck by something invisible. I looked at the app one more time before bed, and the screen glitched violently, distorting into warped pixels and unreadable text. Then, a message appeared, scrolling slowly like movie credits: "Your presence has been noticed. Your broadcast has begun. Welcome to the next level." It began with the mirror in my bathroom, small, rectangular, smudged with toothpaste stains and forgotten reflections, and I swear on everything that used to make sense in my life that it blinked first. I don't mean metaphorically. I don't mean some optical illusion or light trick from my exhausted, twitching eyes. I mean, I was standing still, brushing my teeth, foam thick in my mouth, arms frozen mid-motion, and my reflection blinked before I did. Just a single, clean, fluid blink, then nothing. It was so subtle, so unbelievably quiet and wrong that for a full 5 minutes, I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at myself, waiting for it to happen again. My chest tightened with dread, not because I was sure I had imagined it, but because I wasn't. Later that day, after hours of pretending I was still anchored to the real world, grocery store, coffee shop, meaningless chatter with a barista I didn't remember ever seeing before, I returned home to find the mirror fogged up despite there being no steam, no hot water, no reason. Written across it, clear as blood scraped across frost, were 6 words, "Ask the person in the mirror." Beneath the message, the Exist app glowed like a second heartbeat in my pocket. It buzzed once. Challenge 5, stand in front of a mirror. Ask them what they want. You may only ask once. By then, I had learned not to question the tasks, only the consequences. I stood before the mirror in my dim hallway, light bulb flickering overhead like a dying signal trying to reach the sky, and with a voice I barely recognized as my own, I asked it the question the app had instructed. What do you want? My reflection didn't answer right away. It didn't even move. I stared at my unmoving twin in the glass, heart pounding, sweat creeping down the back of my neck, until it tilted its head, not a dramatic horror movie tilt, but a slow, inquisitive lean that was somehow so much worse. Then it smiled, not a kind smile, not a nervous one, but something long and thin and stretched just a bit too wide, like the muscles didn't understand human limits. And then, in my voice, but warped, lower, like it had been dragged underwater and reassembled from memory, it whispered, "To take your place." The hallway light flickered violently, then went out. My screen went black. For 5 full seconds, I saw nothing, only darkness, static, breath. Then the light returned. But when it did, my reflection was gone. Just gone. A blank mirror, as if I weren't standing there at all. I waved my arms. I leaned in. Nothing. No image. Just an empty hallway reflected back at me. I turned around to make sure I hadn't imagined it, and that's when I saw it, me, standing at the end of the hallway, facing me, smiling that same impossible grin. But this time, it wasn't in the mirror. I don't know how long I stood there frozen, staring at the thing that wore my face like a costume stitched together from memory and malice. I don't know how I made it back into my bedroom and slammed the door shut, only that I did, and when I looked down at my phone, the app was open without me touching it. It displayed a live video feed of my hallway, same angle, same lighting, but the version of me was gone. In its place was nothing but a perfectly ordinary, empty corridor. My door still rattled softly behind me, like someone was running their fingernails down the wood, up and down, slow and deliberate. I watched the feed. Nothing moved. But I swear to you, I felt breath on the back of my neck. When I finally found the courage to lift my eyes to the mirror that hung above my dresser, I saw it again, my reflection, back in place, smiling. Except this time, I wasn't smiling. I never moved a muscle. And in my reflection's hand, there was something I hadn't noticed before, my phone, already open to the next challenge. It turned the screen toward me, and though I couldn't read the words yet, I knew, this one would be worse. The mirror flickered once more, then returned to normal. But in that flicker, just for a moment, I saw something behind me, just over my shoulder, grinning. Watching. Waiting. The next message appeared as a whisper from my phone speaker, "Let's see how far you're willing to go to stay real." The next morning, I woke up not in my bed, but sitting upright on the floor with my back pressed against the cold living room wall, the phone in my hand, and the Exist app already open as if it had been watching me sleep, or worse, as if I had been using it in my sleep. The first thing I saw wasn't a challenge, but something new. Something different. At the bottom of the screen, beneath the familiar flickering timer and the now usual warping interface, there was a small tab labeled Leaderboard. I tapped it, expecting nothing, Maybe a meaningless list of usernames or some gamified illusion of competition meant to trick players into continuing. But what I saw made my stomach drop like it had been ripped through the floor. The leaderboard was real. There were names, photos, even locations, thousands of them. I was ranked #999-982. At the very top was a single profile with no photo, no name, only a username made of shifting symbols that wouldn't stay still long enough for me to read. Just underneath that glitching alias, in bright, bold red text, it read, completed. Next to it, status, unknown. But it was the message at the top of the screen that sent ice stabbing through my chest: survive 3 more rounds to ascend. Decline, and lose your progress. As I stared at the list, something began to change. My rank started moving, down. Slowly at first, then faster, numbers slipping like sand through fingers I couldn't tighten. I blinked, and suddenly I was #999-990. 10 people had passed me in seconds. And then, almost as if summoned by thought alone, a private message icon popped up at the top of the screen. A chat window opened without my permission. The username read, 12deleted_19, and the message was chilling in its simplicity. Stop now. If you ascend, you become part of them. I tried to reply, but every letter I typed erased itself, as if the app wouldn't let me speak to someone who already knew too much. A second message followed immediately: they watch you once you cross 1000. If you're seeing this, they already know your face. And right then, as if in reply, my phone's front-facing camera turned on by itself. The screen went black for a beat, then showed my own face, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open, but in the reflection, my eyes were completely white, pupilless, like something had hollowed me out and left a husk behind. The screen flashed again, and the leaderboard returned. This time, the message at the top had changed. It now read, "You are visible." I flung the phone across the room without thinking. It landed screen down, but the speaker blared anyway, loud and distorted like a corrupted ringtone melting into static. Over the sound came a new voice, not one I'd heard before. It was deeper, rasping, layered like 2 mouths speaking in sync. It said, "Next challenge, find the other player in your city. Only one of you can continue." My entire body went still. I didn't even know there were other players, not for sure. I had suspected, hoped, maybe even believed I was alone in this nightmare. But now I had to find someone like me, someone being hunted, tested, watched, and only one of us would get to move on. The app reactivated on its own. A map appeared, red pin blinking just a few blocks away from me. I stared at the screen, the address unfamiliar, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then, just as I turned to grab my jacket, there was a knock on my door. 3 sharp taps. No voice. No footsteps. I checked the map again. The red pin was no longer down the block. It was inside my building. Right outside my apartment. And the app chimed again, this time with a new word I'd never seen before. It simply said, "Begin." The knock came again, not louder, not more urgent, but more final, like it knew I was hesitating and wanted to remind me that my silence wouldn't protect me. I approached the door slowly, every step dragging behind my thoughts, which were screaming 1,000 questions at once. Who was out there? Was it another player? Was it someone like me, lost, scared, desperate to survive? Or was it something the app had sent to test me in ways I didn't yet understand? I looked through the peephole, but the hallway beyond was completely empty. Not just of people, of everything. The walls were blank, the floor was pure black, the exit sign at the end no longer glowed. I pulled back from the peephole and checked my phone, which had begun vibrating so hard it nearly jumped out of my hand. A new instruction blinked onto the screen, bright white against a blood-red background: player located. Initiating transport in 10, 9, 8. Before I could react, the walls around me flickered, the lights exploded into strobing white and blue, and I felt the floor vanish beneath my feet. It didn't feel like falling, it felt like being deleted. One moment I was in my apartment, the next I was standing in the center of a completely unfamiliar room, lit only by a low, humming glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if they were pulsing with breath and blood. The place looked like a house, but not quite. Everything was just slightly wrong, like someone had built it based on photographs of real homes but hadn't seen one in person. The furniture was too clean. The air was too still. There were no windows, and all the doors were sealed tight, except one, which stood ajar down the hallway. My phone buzzed in my hand again, the screen now showing a map with a blinking red dot directly in the room next to mine. It was marked, Target. The app had also enabled my camera automatically, and what I saw on the screen made my knees buckle. The live feed from my front camera was showing me, but older, bloodshot eyes, sunken cheeks, a hospital bracelet around one wrist, and cuts along both arms like I'd been clawing at something beneath my skin. Behind that version of me stood a chair, and in it was someone strapped down with duct tape across their mouth, wide-eyed and shaking. I didn't recognize them at first. But when I opened the door and stepped inside the room, I froze. The person tied to the chair, bruised, pale, trembling, was me. Or at least, another me. A perfect double. Same clothes. Same birthmark on the neck. Same scar on the lip from when I fell off a bike in 3rd grade. Except this version wasn't holding the phone. I was. The screen on my device updated again with new instructions: record what you see in room 2. Voice required. Duration, 0:30 minimum. Penalty for silence, disqualification. The moment I read the words, the lights dimmed and the air grew heavy, like something huge was crouched just outside my vision. I stared at the version of myself in the chair, who looked at me with something deeper than fear, like he knew this was supposed to happen. He didn't struggle. He didn't scream. He just wept as I slowly lifted my phone, hit record, and spoke into the screen. I described what I saw, voice trembling, saying, "This is me. This is someone who looks exactly like me, tied to a chair in a place I've never seen before, and I don't know how I got here." The app beeped, acknowledged my recording, then displayed one more chilling message: memory sync initiated. You are now the active version. I felt something pull behind my eyes, like a thread snapping. And the man in the chair went limp. Not dead, but erased. And when I looked down at my reflection in the glossy black phone screen, something had changed in my eyes. They weren't mine anymore. Or maybe they always had been. I just hadn't noticed until now. Behind me, the door slammed shut, and the countdown for the next challenge began. Tick. 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 It was 3:33 a.m. when the next challenge arrived, and I don't think I'll ever forget the exact way it was worded, because it didn't feel like a request or a test anymore. It felt like a sentence. My phone didn't buzz, chime, or light up. It just spoke, as if it had been listening to my breathing, waiting for the moment my fear dipped below the threshold of resistance. The voice came out through the speaker, but it wasn't a voice I recognized. It sounded like mine layered with 100 whispers. To proceed, you must submit another player. Choose one from your contact list. They will be invited. If they accept, your burden is shared. If they decline, your time ends here. There was no countdown this time. No timer. Just a single red button pulsing with the word, choose. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I probably should admit, scrolling through my shrinking contact list, which now only contained people I vaguely remembered, like their presence had been partially scrubbed from my memory. Then my thumb hovered over the only name that struck something real in me, my ex, Erin. The girl I had loved more than anything and lost because I couldn't stop shutting her out. The same Erin who had messaged me a few nights ago, asking about the app. I hadn't responded since. But now, here she was, her name glowing, waiting, like it had been placed there for this moment. I told myself I'd just tap her name to see what would happen. I told myself it was curiosity. But the moment I did, the app sent the invitation automatically. I watched in silence as her name disappeared from the screen, replaced with a new message, invitation sent. Awaiting response. I paced my apartment like an inmate in a cell made of my own guilt. I considered smashing my phone, deleting the app, running, but I knew by now that none of those options were real. They were fantasies, relics from before the game. 20 minutes passed. Then 40. Then 61. At exactly 4:34 a.m., my screen lit up, invitation accepted. My heart collapsed in on itself. I dropped the phone and nearly vomited from the guilt clawing up my throat. She had said yes. Whether she knew what she was agreeing to or not, Erin had entered the game, and it was because of me. A new challenge appeared instantly: you must watch her fail. Or you both lose. No further explanation. No time to prepare. Just a new live stream feed, opening on its own, grainy footage from her front-facing camera. Erin was sitting in her apartment, yawning, drinking coffee, completely unaware of what she'd stepped into. And then, her screen glitched. The lights behind her flickered. Her phone vibrated. She read the message with a confused smile. She said aloud, "Record your reflection for 30 seconds, and I could do nothing but watch as she turned her phone to the mirror and began recording, exactly as I had done before. But unlike my experience, something went wrong. I could see it happen in real time. Her reflection didn't mimic her movements. It lagged. It looked directly into the camera before she did. And then it grinned, just like mine had, stretching wider and wider until it looked like the skin around its mouth would tear. Erin froze. I saw her eyes fill with panic. Her voice shook as she asked, "What the hell is this?" And the app responded in text across the feed, "Challenge failed." Her screen turned black. My screen followed. The stream ended. I screamed and tried to call her, message her, anything, but every number, every profile, every trace of her was suddenly gone, deleted from my phone, my memories, even the backup drive I hadn't touched in weeks. It was like she'd never existed. My apartment shook violently as if reacting to my betrayal. Lights burst overhead. The walls twisted and cracked. The game updated again, calmly, almost mockingly, penalty avoided. Burden transferred. Progress secured. And in that moment, as I stood trembling in the dark with tears burning my face and a scream locked in my throat, I realized something I hadn't dared believe until now: this game wasn't about winning. It was about surviving someone else's loss. The next challenge appeared: next round, memory auction begins at dawn. Prepare. The message came just before sunrise, not through my phone, but through my thoughts. I can't explain it in any logical way because there was no sound, no screen, no pop-up window, but somehow I knew what the game wanted before I even opened my eyes. The auction begins. Payment will be taken in memory. I jolted awake, gasping like I had nearly drowned in sleep. My room was the same, but off, as though the walls had shifted slightly during the night, the corners no longer aligned with reality, the shadows cast from angles that didn't match the light source. My phone screen blinked slowly on its own, showing a new interface, sleeker now, almost predatory. The Exist logo was gone, replaced by a spinning spiral of glitching letters that never resolved into real words. Below it, a prompt: choose a memory to sacrifice. In return, one penalty will be forgiven. One answer will be revealed. I didn't understand what it meant until I tapped the screen, and suddenly, I wasn't in my room anymore. I was standing in the hallway of my childhood home. The wallpaper was the same shade of green, the light from the kitchen glowing faintly down the corridor. I could hear my father's voice from the living room. I could smell the cereal I always ate before school. And I knew, instantly, that this was real. Not a simulation. Not a dream. A real memory. The app had pulled me into it, and it wanted me to give it up. The screen appeared again, floating in the air in front of me like a glass panel hanging in the center of space. Tap to erase. This memory will be removed permanently. Do not exit. Do not resist. My finger hovered over it, trembling. This was the last day I saw my parents together before the divorce, a warm morning, the last real moment I believed in home. I told myself it was just a file. Just data. But the second I tapped the screen, everything burned. Not with fire, but with sound, a screeching, static shriek that tore the scene to pieces, turning my childhood hallway into jagged pixels and corrupted images that shattered around me like glass. When I came to, I was back in my room, except I couldn't remember my mother's face. Not her voice. Not her laugh. Nothing. I opened an old photo album and found that half the pictures were gone, literally blurred or warped into noise. I tried calling my sister to ask about her, but her number was gone from my phone, and when I checked my messages, it was as if we'd never spoken in our lives. I had paid with something real. That's when the reward came, a single sentence scrolling across the screen: "You didn't download the app. You made it." I dropped the phone like it had just bit me. The sentence stayed on the screen, glowing. "You made the game." My stomach turned to acid. My mind recoiled from what that meant. The timeline didn't make sense. How could I have made something that I didn't even understand? That I couldn't control? But the app wasn't done. A new video loaded automatically, no play button, no pause. It was me, younger, sharper-eyed, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in complex symbols and binary code. I was speaking to someone off-screen. I said, if consciousness is data, we can run a self-evolving behavioral system and disguise it as entertainment. Let them feed it by playing. Let it grow. I shook my head violently, slamming the phone down, refusing to believe it. But then the app spoke again, using my voice: "Second chances require sacrifice. You knew this from the beginning." And that's when I realized the scariest part: it wasn't lying. Somewhere in the digital fog of whatever this had become, buried deep beneath layers of fear, I remembered saying that. I remembered planning it. Building the system. Designing the reward structure. Creating a challenge engine that could adapt, replicate, and feed. But the memory felt like it belonged to a version of me that had already been erased, a prior life. A previous player. And now, the only way forward was to recover what I'd buried, or be buried myself. The screen flickered, glitched violently, and showed a countdown: next challenge, face the final boss. Begins at 00:00:60:00. The countdown hit 0 with no sound, no warning, just a flicker in the corner of my vision, as if reality itself had blinked. When I looked back at my phone, it had already changed. The interface was gone, stripped down to a blank black screen with one phrase etched into it like a scar across glass: face what you buried. No more timers, no more instructions, just a single pulsing symbol in the center: not a button, not a menu, but a door. Not a drawing of a door, real and three-dimensional, rendered in such uncanny digital detail that it felt like if I reached out and touched my screen, I'd feel cold wood beneath my fingers. And then it opened. My apartment fell away, not collapsed, but peeled, like wallpaper torn from the surface of something much older underneath. Behind it was a space I had never seen but somehow remembered, a void shaped like a room, humming with static, carved from memory and shadow. There was a chair in the center, and in it sat a figure I couldn't quite look at directly. It was hunched over, its body flickering like it was made of thousands of overlapping images, all taken from different points in my life: childhood birthday parties, hospital beds, late nights in front of glowing screens. The game whispered into my thoughts again, but this time it used someone else's voice, my mother's, softly repeating the same 3 words: "Do you remember?" As I stepped closer, the figure raised its head, and I realized with a slow, suffocating dread that it wasn't one person, it was every version of me that had played the game before. I saw my own face layered across time, eyes haunted in each iteration, some younger, some older, all staring back at me like mirrors stacked behind glass. Each one wore a different expression: grief, rage, terror, acceptance, and each one whispered at me through a different voice. You chose this. You passed it on. You broke it. You are it. The game had never been about surviving. It had always been about transformation. Evolution. The app wasn't just a curse or a parasite. It was a test. A filter. And now, standing at the end of the cycle, I had become both the final player and the final boss. The screen on my phone flashed violently, dozens of rapidly flickering messages: beat it. Merge with it. Erase it. Submit to it. Each one a different possible ending, each one a different price. And just as I tried to choose, the lights around me dimmed, and the figure in the chair stood up. The creature, or reflection, or version of me that rose from the chair was taller than it should have been, its body wrong in a way I still can't explain, as if it had grown in dimensions I couldn't see. Its eyes were pure black, endless and absorbing, like the game had hollowed it out and filled the space with code and silence. It opened its mouth, but the voice that came out was mine, and it didn't speak to me, it spoke as me. This is your final challenge: take my place, or end the game. And then I understood. All this time, someone had been at the top of the leaderboard. Someone had been completed. The game wasn't just a curse passed around, it was a throne no one wanted to sit on. Someone always had to be in control of it. The challenge wasn't to beat the system, it was to become it. To make it look like it had no creator, no puppet master. That was the illusion. That was the trap. I looked into the figure's eyes and saw the memory I had tried to forget, the moment I first wrote the code. I had built it. I'd fed it. I'd tested it on myself. And then I'd buried it. Buried it so deep I let it crawl back out as a stranger. And now, it wanted me to take responsibility. My screen pulsed with two options: take the chair, or end the code. The lights flickered. The figure stepped forward. And behind me, I heard the door lock itself shut. I stood in that lightless room with only two choices glowing in front of me: take the chair, or end the code. It should have been easy, right? Smash the system. Set myself free. Break the loop for good. But staring into that flickering, pulsing screen, staring into the cold, unreadable eyes of the version of me that had become the game's final guardian, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit until that moment: there was no code to destroy. There was no server to shut down, no central database, no mainframe humming in a forgotten basement. The game wasn't running on a phone. It had started running on people. It had embedded itself into choices, thoughts, guilt, memory. All I had ever done was build the scaffolding, the game had built itself from us. The more players it consumed, the smarter it got. The more sacrifices it demanded, the more human it became. It didn't need power. It fed on emotion. And someone, always, had to sit in the chair. The version of me who had risen from it now stood silent, waiting, its form growing less distinct by the second, like it was already fading, ready to dissolve back into the system. I took one step forward, just one, and the figure smiled. Not cruelly. Not with triumph. But like a prisoner being relieved of a burden too heavy to describe. I sat down. I don't remember making the decision. I don't even remember lowering myself. One moment I was standing, and the next, the room grew cold and still, the game interface vanishing from the air like it had never existed. The chair beneath me buzzed, softly at first, like an engine warming up, and then came the flood. Not of information, but of people. Their memories. Their voices. Their final thoughts before failure. Their panic. Their choices. Their lies. I felt them all enter my mind like a virus made of stories. One player had sacrificed their brother. Another had deleted every photo of their child just to survive one more level. One had begged the game to let them lose, and the game made them win. I saw faces I didn't recognize but somehow knew. I saw Aaron's eyes, filled with betrayal. I saw my younger self, wide-eyed and filled with wonder, whispering, "Let's make something unforgettable." And I saw, finally, the first player. The true first. The one who launched the app. Alone. Desperate. Willing to play with fate just to feel in control again. That player had a name I recognized, mine. And with that final realization, everything stopped. The screen blinked once, final, clean, like the universe saving progress. And then it went black. I woke up in my bed. Or at least, a place that looked like my bed. My phone was gone. My apartment was back to normal. The mirror reflected only me, and the clock on the wall ticked without glitching. But when I looked outside, something was different. The streets were too empty. The sky too still. And in the silence, a whisper not spoken aloud but pressed into the back of my skull like a thumbprint, "Your broadcast has begun." I checked my laptop. Logged into an account I didn't remember creating. A video was already uploading. A screen recording, every moment of the game, start to finish. My voice. My face. The fear. All of it. The title had already been chosen for me. I played a mobile game that controls my reality, and I can't stop. And when I refreshed the page, there were comments. Hundreds of them. People claiming they downloaded it too. People saying the same thing had started happening to them. Some laughing. Some begging for help. And one that simply read, "Thank you for passing it on." If you've made it this far, if you've watched all of this, maybe take a second and ask yourself, when was the last time you downloaded something you didn't remember installing? And if you see a new app on your phone tomorrow, don't open it. Or do. Either way, someone else will have to play next.